it was the old, especially the old English rock bands, which there were a lot of back then, and so we used to go to concerts and things like that together as well. But that was me, and I always had this dream of growing my hair, like you see on the album covers. And my problem with my hair is my hair doesn't grow like that; it grows like that. So it's always been one of my.
At least they grows on you,
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, I shouldn't have talked about hair, should I?
Don't worry, I had the dream.
Yeah.
Okay, here episode 5, guys. Welcome back. Today we have John Parkhouse, CEO of PwC Luxembourg.
Good afternoon.
Thanks a lot for coming to our little show.
Pleasure.
As usual, like Giacomo will start with the question.
So, who are you today? How would you find John today?
How would you find me? As in, how do I feel?
Define. How would
I define John today? Wow. I thought this was going to be a nice, gentle little chat. And I'm like, now I have to think on a Saturday.
Right off the
bat. That's quite a challenge. How would I define me? I think somebody that is somebody that's quite passionate, somebody that loves doing what they love to do, right? And I'm fortunate enough that my job is something I love to do. And I'm fortunate enough to have a great family, and I can spend time doing stuff that I like to do. But I'm passionate about what I do, and I'm sort of noted as being very excited about what I do as well. So I think it's somebody that tries to be kind to people, tries to sort of always think about how other people are sort of receiving what I'm doing. Somebody that is probably not as sporty as they should be, and probably enjoys life a little bit too much, if you know what I mean. And somebody that loves living in Luxembourg.
Cool. Because actually, so basically, since inception, right? The first 90 we thought about making this podcast. Okay, there was a lot of gin involved, but it's okay.
And unfortunately, we're doing it at lunchtime on a Saturday, so there's no gin involved today.
Today,
I have my coffee and my sparkling water. Thank you.
Detox, right?
Detox today, yeah.
No, but like a little, fun fact, a bit of fangirling, because, we thought, okay, who do we want to interview first? And we said, it has to be John, right?
It has to be John. There we go.
Okay, second one, it's Elon Musk. So
there we go.
We are working on it.
We are working on it. But even to get you was a bit.
It was a little bit of a challenge, yeah.
Apparently, you're a bit busy. But
apparently, I'm a little bit.
I don't know
busy.
why, but
yes.
How come you're that busy?
I blame my PA. That's it. She just doesn't manage my agenda well enough, I think, which is very unfair.
So tell us. So where do you come from?
So I grew up in a small village in the middle of England, in a county called Northamptonshire, a small village called Isham, and went to school round there, and essentially left there when I went to university at about 18, and then I sort of did my university time. I actually did a physics degree. At the time, I was really interested in physics at school. Got to university and realized I actually didn't have the maths to cope. But I managed to get through 3 years of physics.
Okay.
Graduated there, and then it was like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I was looking for lots of jobs, and back then, you wouldn't remember, but back then, basically, all of the application forms, they were all manual fill out. There were lots of pages, and if you made an error, you basically had to start again. I spent a whole term virtually filling out application forms. And I remember going into a friend's apartment one day, and he was filling out an application form that was one piece of paper. So it was 2 sides, one piece of paper, and it was like, I don't care what that's for. I want to fill it in. And it was for an accounting firm, not actually PwC at the time. So I filled it in. A few days later, they offered me a job. And that's then how I then moved away from basically where I was and trained in a place called Milton Keynes in the UK.
Okay. And so how was your childhood? Like, what were your passions at the time? What were you doing? Like before moving to university?
But you studied in London?
No. I studied at University of Warwick.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, which everybody knows for business.
Yeah.
So there's actually a lot of people here in Luxembourg that are Warwick alumni, but they're usually MBA alumni.
Okay. Yeah.
So I went there for undergrad. So it was famous for business, and so if you wanted to do business at Warwick, you had to be very, very good. It wasn't famous for physics, so actually I was able to get in to do physics, so I was there. But passions as a child, I'm not sure I'd have described myself as a very passionate child. Mm-hmm. I guess as I was growing up, the thing I actually really liked to do when I was sort of between like the age of 12 and 16, there was sort of a small gang of us in the village. There's probably 6 or 7 kids hanging around, this is really not very exciting, right? So there was one particular friend that I used to war game with. So we would basically recreate battles with the little soldiers, Napoleonic and World War II. And then a friend of mine, he used to live at the manor house in the village. So the big sort of manor house. And his parents had a cellar. So we would basically sit in the cellar. We would drink this beer that we would make ourselves, this homemade beer, which was very, very dangerous. We would listen to heavy metal music, and we would play bridge. So bridge.
Okay, card game. Bridge, yeah.
And so, and if you think back, it was like I was like 16, 17, 18 years old. So most kids are out, nightclubs and pulling girls and all this sort of stuff. I'm sat there with my buddies in a cellar, listening to heavy metal and learning how to play bridge.
And what were you listening to?
It was back then. It would have been a lot of AC/DC because it was that was their prime time. Meatloaf was another big one, and you had like Saxon, Iron Maiden. It was the old, especially the old English rock bands, which there were a lot of back then. And so we used to go to concerts and things like that together as well. But that was me. And I always had this dream of growing my hair,
long hair,
like you see on the album covers. And my problem with my hair is my hair doesn't grow like that; it grows like that. So it's always been one of my.
At least they grows on you,
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, I shouldn't have talked about hair, should I?
Don't worry, I had the dream.
Yeah.
And so you're really good at bridge.
I wouldn't say I'm good, but actually it's the card game I love the most. I like poker, but bridge is it's a fantastic card game. And actually, still today, when I have a couple of minutes and I need to clear my mind, I've got a little bridge game on my phone, and that's what I play. Right, I'll do a couple of bridge hands, and I'd love to set up a pop bridge at PwC.
Yeah.
It's just I know that if I set it up, that I would probably never get to attend. So it just would be stupid to set up. But that would be great if I found some fellow bridge players.
I never played bridge actually.
It is the best card game.
Is it hard to learn or?
It's I would say it's easy-ish to learn, but takes a lifetime to master because the basics you can get to not too difficult, but the complexities of it are. I'm still learning.
It's like poker. It's really easy to play the first time, but to master it really takes a lifetime.
Yeah, but it's a great game. It's a great game.
Okay, I see. It's the same. We have something similar in Italy. It's like called briscola. Actually, to my
it's probably not that similar, right?
It's just like you see like old people,
old people
in
playing
the
it.
villages and saying bad words.
yeah, swearing.
Yeah, it's
The louder, the the
Sit
stronger the card.
yeah.
Exactly.
It's like this in the
Perfect.
middle of the street, and it's so funny to watch them. But,
Yeah. And it's actually not they play that much nowadays because younger generation is like losing a bit. So it's a
Yeah.
pity actually, but yeah.
The younger generation generally becomes the older generation, and then they'll still be sitting around in 50 years' time.
Yeah, let's see in 30, 40 years we're playing Briscola in the street.
I mean, you lost your hair already, so you're
There you go.
one step closer,
Most
right?
of the way
Yeah.
there, yeah.
Best
Tough
friend.
crowd here, right? Yeah.
I
Tough
don't know.
crowd.
Okay, don't worry. I'll come
Yeah,
back at
yeah.
you later. So,
So and
enough hair talking, okay?
yeah. So back in high school, you were what like pushed you to go for physics? Like
Well, firstly, I actually didn't want to stay at school. So up until 16. So in the UK, you can finish school at 16 when you do what they call O levels back then. Yeah, I think they're GCSEs now. I think may have changed again. And then you can either leave or you have the option to stay on and do A levels. Right, so like the IB equivalent. So I never wanted to stay. And actually, so was looking for a job when I was 16, and it was a bad time to be looking for a job in the UK. I went for a job on something I'd always wanted to do, and maybe I can tell you that story in a bit because it was a lesson learnt. And I ended up not being able to get a job, so I ended up staying on to do my A levels. And basically, one of the because I didn't do that well in my first round of exams, one of the things I always really enjoyed was physics. So I was always good at maths and I was good at physics, which is why I thought actually accounting wasn't too bad because I'm sort of like, okay, I'm sort of good with numbers, so I'll give it a try type thing. So I studied that at A level. And actually, just to give you an indication as to my sort of early days in senior school, essentially when I went on to do my A levels, I was sort of appointed as head boy. So this is like the top prefect, right? And I remember the headmaster explaining to me once. He's like, "Well, the reason I picked you is that you were one of the few students that I knew." Because in the first part of my school career, I was always the guy standing outside his office, waiting to get talked to, shall we say. So it was an interesting first few years that I had. I was not a perfect student, shall we say.
You were popular at the time,
I
right?
was popular with the headmaster, that's for sure. He seemed to want to see me a lot for some reason. But then basically I did the A levels, and actually that's where I really flourished at school. I think that was like my best time at school, and really enjoyed it. And so that's where I decided, okay, yeah, I'll go on to university. And the advice I was given was, well, if you enjoy physics, you're good at maths, then go ahead and give that a try. So that's how I ended up doing physics, and it's always fascinated me. I actually wanted to be. If you think about sort of the job I wanted to be as I was growing up, I wanted to be an astronomer, right? But astronomers are super smart, and actually, it's only when you study physics or that sort of thing that you realize how super smart these people are in terms of the level of maths that they need to be able to do what they do. It's incredible.
And when you were like filling application and everything, and you told us that you filled this application, it was like PwC.
No, it was another accounting firm.
Accounting firm. Like you went for it directly, or
they basically I sent it in. They came back and gave me an interview date. So actually that really impressed me because they gave me an interview date. So I went in for the interview on the Friday, and on the Monday in my pigeonhole was an offer letter. And I was like, whoa. and I'm still trying to get my guys to be able to replicate that here today, right? But so yeah, there was an offer letter, and then it was like, okay, that's good. I've got a job secured. Now I'll find a job that I really want to do. Mm-hmm. Then you obviously know how university life is, and you don't really prioritize the things you maybe should prioritize. Yeah. So I ended up not finding anything else, and going to join KPMG actually at the time.
Okay.
KPMG Pete McClintock, it was called then, and I joined them on the 22nd of September, 1988.
Whoa! And for how many years you stayed in KPMG?
Well, I stayed in KPMG until 91 when I qualified. And actually, one of the things that I'd sort of decided on when I went to KPMG was I wanted to go abroad. I wanted to travel. And actually, the job I'd gone for when I was 15, 16 was to serve in the Merchant Navy, to actually work on an oil tanker. So I'd always wanted to travel, and basically what happened was that when I qualified, that was sort of the plan. I was going to get my exams in the UK, and then I was actually going to go to the United States. That was sort of what I'd been discussing, and it was all planned. But that year was a very, very bad year for the economy, and so there were a lot of people being laid off. Okay. And so to give you an idea, in my office, because I wasn't in London, I was in a regional office in Milton Keynes. In my year, there were like about 22 people between within a year of me. And I always remember this. I was out at a client with two of my peers and then a team as a senior, and phone call came in. One of them got called back. No job, right? And then somebody else called and said, "Hey, they're calling people in to fire them," right? And so the other colleague got called back, gone. So out of those 22 within a year of me, there were 2 of us left. It was like decimation. And then KPMG basically said to me, well, this thing about the US, we need you to stay here now because we don't have anybody else, right? And I'm sort of like, well, you just fired all my friends, and now you want me to stay here. So I then started looking for a job, and I saw this advert for Price Waterhouse, and I still remember it. It was on the back of the accountancy magazine that was sort of required reading as a young accountant, and it was a picture of the Statue of Liberty, and it was like, "Come to the land of opportunity" or something like that. And I was like, "Wow, that'd be great." So I wrote in and applied, and actually it was one of my real claims to fame, because what happened was KPMG were not the only firm that were laying people off. I mean, all of the big firms were laying lots of people off. And at the time, what Price Waterhouse were saying was, they were saying, we have no work for you here, but if you want to go to the States for 2 years, and then you can come back, right? And that was the program. Okay. So you go on this program. So normally on this program that I applied for, normally they basically took people internally and externally to go to the US. And the year I did it, I was the only non-Price Waterhouse person on the program. Oh. And I was like, wow, I only found that out afterwards. And it's actually how I ended up, in a way, it's how I ended up getting to Luxembourg, because I then went to New York, and basically everybody else on the program had already got their network. They already knew people in the States, and they were sort of asked, where do you want to go, and what specialism do you want to go in? And, it'd be like banks or technology or whatever. The one thing nobody wanted to do was mutual funds, right? So the one thing I got given was mutual funds. And growing up in the middle of England, I'd never gone near financial services. My clients were like shoemakers, brewers, baking companies.
Operational companies, right?
Yeah, just real companies.
Yeah.
The real economy. And I remember one year, one of my favorite things I did was I did a stock take of pubs in the UK. So basically, I spent a week going around different pubs, and some of them I stayed overnight. And
you were happy about
you
it,
had
right?
you had to count the beer and the cellar that they had, etc., etc. But anyway, so that got me to New York. I did 2 years in New York, and whilst I was in New York, I was doing a lot of work in the Caribbean. So I basically started doing hedge funds, and they were pretty funky hedge funds for the time. If you think this was like 91, 92 through 94. And there was a lot of mortgage-backed stuff. It was really a bit funky.
They were shorting a lot at the time.
They were. It was like a lot of short. It was interest-only securities, IOs, POs. So all these strip securities, all these mortgage-backs. Yeah, they were leveraged up to the hilt and massive leverage. And it was fascinating. All these interest rate swaps. And unfortunately, the client that I was mainly working for, they basically did everything the wrong way. Versus where interest rate. So these funds were just annihilated. You know, they issued like a nominal of 100 grand per note, and within about 18 months, 18 months, 2 years, they were down to 15 to 20, and it was just a bloodbath. But anyway, I was auditing the damn things, and I ended up. So I was doing a lot in the Caribbean, and these audits were really complicated. And it was really the early days of all these derivatives and this sort of stuff. And it would probably take me about 6 months to get an audit of this fund done in the Caribbean, right? Nightmare. I came to Luxembourg. There were 2 of them in Luxembourg. I came to Luxembourg with Chase Manhattan. They were doing the administration down in Rue Platis, down in the Grund. And 2 funds in 2 weeks, done. I was leaving Luxembourg with the final draft of financial statements. I was like, wow, these guys know their stuff, right? I was like super impressed. And then when it came to the end of my tour, essentially I had to make the decision whether to stay in Luxembourg or stay in the US or leave. And my then girlfriend, now wife, didn't want to come to the States. She was still in the UK. So it was like, okay. And her comment was, well, if you want to stay in the States, that's fine. But then you're doing it on your own. And I didn't really want to come back to the UK. So Luxembourg was sort of a compromise where I could sort of say to her, let's come to Luxembourg for 2 years and, we'll try that out. It's a pretty cool place. They know funds. And actually, whilst I was here, when I was doing the audits from New York, it was like May and September. So very nice months. Be sitting outside on the terrace, little espresso, little cigarette. Perfect.
Before moving, let's take like a step back. Before moving to US, like what was your motivation to go abroad? And when you arrived in US, I think 30 years ago, it's really different from now. What was like the differences between UK
and US?
It was
so. If you think about it, so firstly, my motivation. I mean, growing up growing up in the middle of England, we didn't really travel right outside the UK. My dad was a policeman. My mum was a teacher, so it was a very blue collar, as we'd call it in England, blue collar upbringing. Very very, I mean, it was a great childhood, right? I mean, parents worked hard. They were, so oftentimes they weren't there, but still it was a very sort of close-knit family. I guess I've always loved maps. My father was really into sort of geography, and so there was always like this, this air of places that we've never seen and would love to explore. And even today, when I go to airports, I love looking at the departure screen and thinking,
the board,
Marrakesh or Sao Paulo, or, you're just like, oh wow, some great sounding cities. So, and it's one of the things I still love, and it's been such a shame over COVID. I love traveling, and that's one of the things this job has really given me. Not just the role I'm in now, but my career with PwC has just been amazing like that. So I've always had this sort of yearning to explore, if you like, and see different things and experience different cultures. So I really was like, it's not just about visiting, but actually living there. And actually one of the things I sort of still have on my list is I've never lived in Asia. You know, I've lived in Europe and the UK, I've lived in the Americas, but I've never lived in Asia. I've visited a lot of times, but so that might still be out there at some point. But then in terms of the difference, you know, if you imagine that I'd sort of grown up, I mean, going down to London was a big deal. I remember the first few times going down to London, I'll be walking on the street, and because I grew up in a village, it's like I'm saying hello to people, right? It's like, hello, hello, and they're like, all these people are sort of like, who's this freak? Who is this strange person? And then I'll always remember the trip to the States. So I'd never been to America, right? So the first time I go to the US is when I go there to live, right? So I'm sort of getting prepared. I've never been, I'd been on like a couple of flights to like ski trips, right? That was it. So I'd never been long haul. Actually, Italy. So I used to ski in Italy, like in the sixth form. So that was first of all, I remember calling up and sort of saying, you know, is there a way to get sort of upgraded or anything like that? And they're like, well, turn up, and if you look smart, then maybe they'll do that. That was sort of like, and I was all excited because it was this big trip type thing, and I remember turning up, and I'd got a blazer on, and she knows I was like not Italian sharp, but I was English sharp, right? And sure enough, they upgraded me. It was great. So I'm going to New York, this place, and I get upgraded to business class. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. and the nightmare was I basically get into business class. I'm like, wow, look at this, like all these malt whiskies, and you know. So I end up like drinking and eating quite well. And I get to New York, and I remember the story, because there was a mentor that was welcoming you in New York. So it's basically the guy that had been there the year before me, a guy from Yorkshire. I'll always remember him. And he told me afterwards, he basically had come to the airport to meet me, and he's standing there, and we'd talked a lot on the phone. And obviously we didn't have video conference back then, right? So we talked a lot on the phone. And so he's standing there waiting for me at arrivals, and he's looking around, and he's like, I don't actually know what this guy looks like. And there's all these other people there with these cards, right? There's a card with the names on, right? And says, I should have done a card, right? And so he starts looking around. He's like, okay, I need to get a bit of paper or something and put this guy's name on so actually he can see who it is. And then at that point, he said to me after, he said, I come sort of swerving through the arrivals, bump into somebody's trolley and knock their suitcase off. And he's like, that looks like John. Yeah. And it was. So that was, so I got in on a Saturday, and then we were staying in a hotel on 5th, Hotel Delmonico's. And I always remember waking up really early Sunday morning, because obviously with the time zone,
jet lag,
and just going out on Fifth Avenue and thinking, wow, it's like the movies, right? So you've got yellow cabs going around, you've got, you know, the steam coming up through the grates, and that first day, that first Sunday, I honestly, I was just walking around the city pretty much all day, like, oh my God, this is just incredible. And to this day, I'll remember that first day. It's and New York is such a place of it's just sort of how you imagine, you know, like your sort of metropolis should be. You know, busy all the time. I remember finishing work once, leaving the office at about 4 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, walking back to my apartment up 3rd Avenue, and the traffic was jammed.
At 4 a.m.
And I'm like, oh my God, right? I'm not saying every 4 a.m. the traffic's jammed in New York. That's not what I'm saying. But that was a sort of like, I remember that experience, looking at it and thinking, wow, this place is nuts. It's incredible. And it's a city I'll always have in my heart. That's like the big city that
the city.
And I actually have a theory about it, because it's so different in my experience to any other city I've visited. Because the energy, you sort of feel the energy when you cross, right? When you go in. And the theory I've got is that if you go to any other city, right, or any other city I've been to, you know, you come in from the airport or wherever you're coming in from, and you're sort of driving into the city, and basically it builds up, and then you get to the center, and it may be sort of like glass and steel or old buildings or whatever it is, right? But it builds up, gets busier and busier, etc. That's not New York. New York, you've basically got nothing, right? You've got boring suburbia, nothing happening. Then you cross a bridge or go through a tunnel, and it's full on. It's crammed on this island, right? So it's like and I think that has a lot to do with, you know, because as soon as you get onto that island, you feel it, right? It's Manhattan. It's amazing. I'm talking really a lot here, so I just I don't want to.
It's fine. Like you can talk all day, you know.
And how was your like your daily life? I guess like workload was a lot, but what did you enjoy to do back then and back there?
I mean, it was nuts, right? I mean, essentially, we had it was very much a work hard, play hard. I mean, my standard working day in New York would have been in at 7, leave at 10, right? Bar till 2, in at 7, work till 10, bar till 2, in at 7. That was it. Yeah, I was, and I actually remember in my first sort of stint up until Christmas. So I was just going home for Christmas the following day, and I was in with some friends, and I remember I basically drunk my second gin and tonic. So I was on gin and tonic even back then, and just about to get my third, and they were big gin and tonics, because it was and then I actually I actually was like, wow, you know what? I don't feel a thing. I think maybe I I need to calm down. And so that Christmas I just detoxed, which is I think my only ever detox at Christmas was that.
We know the feeling. As well.
But it was great. And so basically, when I was in the States, I had some really great friends. My friends mainly were local friends. It wasn't really the expats. So the expat community, they sort of hung out quite a lot together, but because the group I was in and the mutual fund group, you know, we were often traveling. So we were working a lot in Boston, and then, as I said, in the Caribbean, etc. So it was quite a tight knit group. And so I built really good friends there. And honestly, it's one of the fantastic things about New York is, when I go back, is, you know, many of the people I grew up with as senior are partners, and actually senior partners now, very senior partners. So it's like going home, right? But that meant that I was doing quite a lot of stuff that was local. So, you know, we'd go and hang out at the ball game in the summer. You know, we'd do the basketball, we'd do the football, and you know, so weekends were quite nice. But Sunday mornings was always like bagels and the New York Times, and then maybe up to Central Park. And I used to just love getting out and walking. Like on a Sunday, for me, that was my moment where I spent a bit of time for myself, and I'd just, you know, walk, find a museum. You know, I used to like going to some of these museums and just find, obviously, the big ones I'd explore, but then the other ones, you just walk and walk and walk, and that's one of the great things about New York.
What is like for you, like the best thing about New York, about living there?
first of all, I preface it by saying it's the only city I've lived in, right? I mean, I don't really classify Luxembourg as a full-on city, right? But I think
like if I ask you, I would like to go to New York. Why should I go there? Like, what is the best thing that I could find there?
I mean, I think why do I love New York? So, I mean, I think the energy is a big part of it, because really there's always something going on. It really is that, you know, the city that never sleeps. It really is the city that never sleeps. And there's so many different parts to New York. There's so many different areas. For me as well, it's easy to find my way around because you've got the grid system. So I think from a business perspective, it's like the hub, right? It's the place to be. And then from a personal perspective, there's something for everybody to just have an amazing time. It's just that city is just, for me, just an incredible place to be.
And like you told us that you were with your wife at the time, girlfriend.
Yeah.
And she went in, like she came in New York
to visit,
yeah.
but not to live.
Okay. And how was for her? Like she liked the city. She liked your lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah, she liked New York. I think she didn't love New York, right?
Okay.
And she was somebody opposite to me. She never really wanted to travel. She was very happy in England, right? She likes to travel to visit, but never really had that yearning to go and live somewhere different and explore a different culture. And so, you know, she was sort of, it's okay, right? It's okay. But yeah, and it was nice when I was there. I could then also, you know, the other thing that we do is sort of explore different cities. So, you know, we spent a lot of time in Boston, obviously, but, you know, Chicago, which is another fantastic city, New Orleans, amazing place. That was pre-Katrina, obviously. I haven't been back since Katrina, but a great place to go. You know, San Francisco, Los Angeles. Love Los Angeles. So, you know, there's all these different spots around the US. And, you know, I think people also give the Americans a bit of a hard time, because I think, you know, sort of joke, well, you know, lots of Americans don't even have passports. But, you know, actually, if you live in the US, you don't need a passport, right? You've got the mountains, you've got the beach, you've got the cities, you've got the wide open spaces, you know, and it's... so it was a great 2 years, and I packed a lot into 2 years.
And after US, you went directly to Luxembourg.
Yeah.
You didn't go back to England.
No, it's basically I think I had a 2-week window where I was in the UK just getting my stuff sorted out, and then started in Luxembourg June 1st, 1994.
And you moved directly here with your wife?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'd never lived together, right?
Never lived
so
together.
we were dating each other when in the UK,
yeah.
and then this opportunity came up, and she was actually also an accountant, or she is also an accountant, and she was studying for her exams, so she couldn't leave, right? So she had to finish her exams, and then that was really a hard one, right? It was sort of like. And actually, she was fantastic, because she sort of said, "Look, you know, if it's meant to be, it'll be, and you know, if you don't take this opportunity, you'll always
regret it. Yeah,
you'll always wonder what if, right? What if? And there's no way I'd be here today if I hadn't taken that job. It's just inconceivable. I would have basically carried on in the UK and. Probably would have settled down somewhere and been very happy in the middle of England, but because that was sort of where my wife was from, and she was very happy there, very close to her family.
She's
very
from the same area that.
Yeah, so she grew up probably about I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes from where I grew up. But you know, we met actually on an accountancy training course. So we were both studying the exams, and she was a very diligent student, and I wasn't a very diligent student. Okay, and what happened was I'd actually failed my previous exams, And in the UK, certainly at the time, and I think it's still the same now, basically, if you fail your exams, you probably get one more chance. And if you fail again, then you're out of a job, right? Because it costs a lot for the firms to train you, right? It's a lot of time. So certainly if you're with a big firm, you don't have many chances. So I'd failed, and this was if I failed again, I was out of a job, and I would have not known what I was going to do, right? So it was really important, and I sort of remember that.
An astronomer, maybe.
Yeah, sorry?
An astronomer, maybe.
No, because you have to be really smart to be an astronomer, remember? I did point that out, right? So I remember, normally I was the guy sitting at the back, right, during the courses, right, and just hanging out and having a laugh. This time I sat right at the front, right? I went in and I sat right at the front with the SWATs, or the very diligent people, and my wife was in the second row, so she sat and stared at the back of my neck for 6 weeks. So it's a great neck, actually. You should, I wish you could put it on the.
You got
on
married,
the camera.
thanks to your neck. Huh?
Yeah, but and it was and that was how we met. And actually, I'm not sure I would have met her if I hadn't have been,
committed.
saying I have to pass these exams, and so that was how we met.
Nowadays it's really hard to find a person that is with you, and even if you're distance and everything, because now you can video chat and everything, you can do Skype. I think at the time was a bit different.
There was no.
You were doing phone calls, or how were you communicating?
When I was in the States,
yeah,
I have to say that's probably the thing that kept us together. So actually,
not talking.
Pretty much, yeah. No, it wasn't. And we actually did break up and get back together a couple of times, long distance. But the one thing that I did was I spoke to her every day.
Oh.
So essentially, it was if I was getting in at 1 or 2 in the morning, then I'd call her as she was going to work, right?
Okay.
And then vice versa. So basically, we just chatted each day, and it wasn't like we'd agreed we'll chat each day. It wasn't like, oh, we have to do this to stay together. It was just what
normally
sort of happened. Yeah, it was like, oh, how you doing? And actually, even when we agreed that we should split up, it's like, okay, and she was dating someone, I was sort of dating someone as well, and so it was like, okay, but we carried on talking, and then we sort of got back to it. So it was. When I look back, it was sort of, I guess, sort of quote unquote meant to be, but it's but yeah, it was just normal that we just carried on connecting.
Mm-hmm. And what was, the biggest struggle that in order to adapt to New York or to the US culture, what was the toughest thing for you?
Toughest thing for me was the work. Right, because I said I had no clue on financial services, mutual funds. Never heard of mutual funds, right? Mm-hmm. To give you an example, I think I had sort of heard of Goldman Sachs, right? J.P. Morgan, never heard of J.P. Morgan, right? That was, that was me growing up in the middle of England.
Yeah, back in UK.
And so I was so divorced from that world. It was unbelievable. And actually, it's something that I try not to forget, because your man in the street that's not reading the business news and whatever. I mean, when would they ever come across a J.P. Morgan? Whereas for us, it's like pervasive, right? I mean, everybody knows J.P. Morgan, right? And so, I was coming from that sort of distance. And, I was sort of an okay auditor, right? I was never one of the rock stars. I enjoyed what I did, and I really liked dealing with people, and that's why I've really stayed with it, to be honest. But I remember the first audit that I did there, and basically it was paper file, and I remember I got like 5 pages, and there were sort of like long thin pages was the sort of the US thing at the time, and got 5 pages of coaching notes, right? And some of them had a star against them, some of them had 2 stars against them, and some of them had 3 stars against them, right? And I said to the senior manager that was reviewing it, I said, Mike, what's with the stars? And he's like, well, they're the critical ones. They're the, how the hell have you not covered these ones? And these are the absolutely fundamental, and I just don't even know why I'm reviewing this work ones. And I remember after that session, I remember sort of leaving the office, and again, it was like 2 a.m. or something, and thinking, I've never worked so hard on something and felt so far from actually getting to a result. I was like, I'm not sure this is for me. And I was very close to giving up. I remember walking down, again, walking up 3rd Avenue, actually crying. Right,
Whoa.
You can imagine it was really a sort of a pivotal moment for me, and fortunately, the next job I got onto, the manager was actually an expat who had sort of been through it. He was from Northern Ireland, and he was super nice, super kind, super supportive, and you know, walked through the stuff, and really that was how I started to really learn the stuff. Yeah, because the other guy's nice guy, and actually I'm quite good friends with him now. But you know, he was a hard ass, right? And he wasn't taking prisoners, and it was just some idiot from the UK that doesn't know what he's doing, and I don't have time for this type New York sort of a style. And that sort of saved me, to be honest, because it was very close to me leaving. And yeah. So that was my hardest time.
And when you left US, what was your grade, like manager?
Yeah, I was actually quite, sort of quite, I'd say clever. I didn't, you know, basically I on the program, essentially I didn't drop a year because I was coming from an outside firm. So I went over as a senior 2, right? No, senior 1 actually, and then essentially it was like you had 3 years as senior back then, and so I went over as senior 2, and then I was promoted to manager in New York, right? And then because when you come from the States, or back then when you came from the States to Europe, you skipped a year, right? So I didn't drop a year going, but I skipped a year coming back. So I got promoted to manager in New York, which was actually another of the achievements that I'm very proud of, right? And then I basically joined Luxembourg as an M2, right? Second year. So it was that was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
And I don't know, because maybe we're Italians, but how was food there? Like, did you find a difference from UK or? Because actually, funny fact, like when we ask Vincenzo, because he's been to US as well, it's like, what was the, you know, again, the toughest thing he has to face? He said food there, because I don't know. He said he went to the superstore and he was like looking for milk, and he was saying fresh milk. But the expiry date was like in 6 months. I was like, how come it's a fresh milk?
You know.
Some usage of the word fresh that we're not familiar with, right?
Yeah.
How was the food there? I mean, I was there on a very tight budget. So actually the pay level, you were just being paid as a local, right? There was no sort of expat deal that I had. And so essentially I was, we'd sort of eat out at Mexican and, you know, Tex-Mex type stuff, and even Indian. We wouldn't do Indian because it was too expensive. So it was really local stuff, maybe Italian, you know, local Italian joint. So it was very local, and then, you know, we'd have deli stuff. I don't really remember the food that much as being really much of a deal. It was more, you know, maybe sort of chicken wings would be quite good. You know, a bucket of chicken wings and watch the TV really local, or whatever. Yeah, it was really American fare, and even when I go back now, it's sort of I have to say it's one of the things I do miss here is a good Mexican.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Well, not that I could probably go to the good Mexican because my wife doesn't like Mexican, so it wouldn't really help if there was one here. But I used to really like the Mexicans and the Tex-Mexes, and then some super hot chicken wings.
You agreed because you like hot.
Yeah. But you were living alone in US, or you were sharing?
I sort of moved around a bit, to be honest. I was like, so I started off sharing an apartment with a girl that had come over on the same program, and my girlfriend, or wife now, hated it because she'd call on a Sunday, and Susan would pick up the phone, right? And my wife Sarah was like,
"Where are you?"
What? No, it was. Well, she knew, right? But she's like, it's like, oh yeah, we're just in not in bed, but sort of like in my bedroom, sort of reading the paper together, and she's like, she's in your bedroom on a Sunday morning, and how is that work? Yeah, so that was a bit tricky. So I shared the apartment with this girl for like first 6 months or so, but then she quit because it was actually really tough there, right? So she quit, and went back to the UK.
Okay.
And I'm like, well, I can't afford the apartment on my own. It was actually a pretty nice apartment. It was a pretty nice spot. It was really 56 between first and second, so it's an expensive part of town. And essentially, I remember I was down in Curacao doing some offshore fund stuff, and basically got a call from her and said, I've quit and I'm going back. And I'm like, well, what are we going to do? And she's like, well, we've got all our friends. They're going to come around and they're going to empty the apartment, and they'll look after your stuff. But I didn't have anywhere to live, right? So we were done on our lease, and luckily a friend of mine, he'd started dating a girl and he'd moved in with her. So he offered me his apartment, which is a studio, 48th between 7th and 8th, so just off Times Square. And I can tell you, walking back through Times Square at 3 a.m, you see some interesting things. So I ended up staying there for 6 or 7 months, and then his lease was up. And the thing was, at that point, I was traveling a lot, and I'm like, it's crazy sort of paying for an apartment because I'm always traveling. So I ended up sleeping on a friend of mine's sofa bed for the last 9 months of my tour.
Whoa!
And it was that was up on the Upper East Side, 96 between 3rd and Lex, and actually he's now lives in Luxembourg.
Oh, yeah? No way!
Isn't that spooky? So he was also on the expat sort of tour. And he ended up joining Brown Brothers and running Brown Brothers here. And now he's sort of, I think he sort of is between here and London, I think. But he's still got a house here in Itzig. And Jeff Cook. And so we shared, I took his sofa bed for the last 9 months. And the one thing that Sarah will never forgive him for is that's where I started smoking. Yeah, because he used to smoke, and we'd get back and he'd just have a little ciggy, and that's how I picked up smoking at that late age. Yeah, sort of late 20s. So,
but it was expensive. Like when you moved there, you said like you were on tight budget and everything. Was hard to find an apartment there, like or the company helped you on this?
Company help. They put you up for a period of time, and but no, the program I was on, I didn't get any help. You basically, it was sort of, you were going in sort of as a local hire. So they covered your expenses for like the first month in a hotel whilst you found somewhere, and that's where you're sort of going to IKEA to get the cheap stuff and whatever you're having to dig it out. I remember it was really exciting times actually. It's sort of like finding all these old things that you could take and whatever. But no, you didn't really get a huge amount of help. And I've always had a bit of a problem that I'm not very strong administratively, should we put it that way. And so I was traveling a lot, which meant I was on expenses a lot, but I wasn't great at claiming the expenses. So ended up like, and then I, some of the expenses I missed and whatever. So actually I was really, very cash poor. When I came to Luxembourg, I was basically, I came owing money. Let's put it that way. So, luckily, Sarah, my wife, she's very good at that stuff. She's our banker, and
the CFO.
She's very much so, and she very quickly got me sorted out, and we were all set.
And when you moved to Luxembourg, you want to ask something?
No, go on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And when you moved to Luxembourg, I think you noticed the difference between New York and Luxembourg.
Yeah. Well, I like to say
really?
that
Is there a difference?
I did it the right way because I was a bachelor in New York, and then I was a couple, and then a family in Luxembourg, and that's actually a great way to do it. Yeah. Okay. So, but yeah, very different. But actually, I mean, it's we very quickly really learned to appreciate Luxembourg, and the great thing was, as a manager at the time, it was the moment from a professional side where the mutual fund industry in Luxembourg was really taking off. Yeah, it was sort of UCITS had been there for a few years. It was like 94 I came. So the law had been in place for 6 years. It was starting to gain some traction, and in those early days, the real interest was with the non-European players. So it was the Americans and it was the Swiss, because that was the only way they could get into Europe. Yeah, and so essentially, I was probably going to New York as a manager. Right, if you think about this, probably every 6 to 8 weeks.
Whoa.
And so I was seeing all my friends again. And you're over on expenses. You go and I do the tours, and it was, and the other thing was, it's sort of like we have a saying in England. It's like the one-eyed man is king in the kingdom of the blind, right? Yeah. And so I sort of came over as like the expert in mutual funds, and all the stuff was sort of being built here. Yeah, the regulation was like a book that thick, and it was what really, you learnt it very quickly. But I knew about how funds worked and the complexities and stuff like that. And the great thing was that if I didn't know, I knew who to ask. Right, I had a whole network of people in the US that I could sort of say, well, how does this work over in the US type thing? Yeah, and the great thing was it was the opposite in the US. So in the US, nobody knew about European regulations, right? So again, I've got this thin little book. I can say, this is how it's done in Luxembourg, and And again, if I don't know, I just know who to ask. But I was always that middle guy that was able to facilitate those discussions. And that was a great experience, actually.
But so you came as a manager, and were you expecting to stay that long, or as you said 2 years, right? You were expecting just to stay.
We actually came over, and I was actually I actually left the firm when I was in New York, so I actually signed to join Chase here in Luxembourg, right? And I'd gone around the floor and I'd explained to all the partners I've been working with that I was leaving, and actually it was a very emotional time because I loved PricewaterhouseCoopers. It was an amazing experience in New York. But the thing was, I wanted to come to Luxembourg with Sarah, and we couldn't. We were struggling to get Sarah a job in Luxembourg, or an interview, not even a job, right?
Because at the time, I guess, like
it was tough. She was,
Now you're fine with English, right? But back then, maybe how was it? Was it you had to speak French?
No. I never. You should know, right?
No. But back then, to find a job here,
well,
French,
it was. The thing was, it was for many companies it was difficult if you didn't speak French. For PricewaterhouseCoopers, it was fine. Everything was in English.
Okay.
Everything was in English, right? It was run from London. It was the Luxembourg office was run from London at the time. So anyway, I always remember this going in. I did this whole tour, and I'm sitting there a couple of days later in my cubicle, and I get a call, and there's a chap on the line saying, hi, my name's Edward Bryant. I'm the director in charge of human resources in Europe, and I want to talk to you about your return to Europe. and I'm up on 48. Can you stop up and see me, right? And I'm like, oh, well, obviously nobody's told him that I've quit, right? Anyway, I come in and I walk into this office, and he starts laying into me, right? He's like, I will never forget. He's like, what are you doing? You have no idea what you're doing. How can you be so stupid? There's so much opportunity with the firm in Europe. Why are you leaving the firm? Da, da, da. And I'm like, who the are you, right? I've agonized over this decision. I've made the decision. I'm done, right? And I'd already signed with Chase at the time. And anyway, so we went back and forth for about an hour or something, and he could see he wasn't getting anywhere. Fair play to him. He really tried. And then he made an interesting offer, right? He sort of sat there. He says, listen, why don't you just go away and think about what the firm needs to do for you to stay with the firm, and come back tomorrow and tell me, okay? And I'm like, okay, fair play, right? I'll have a go. And actually, there were two things that I had a problem with, right? Firstly, Sarah didn't want to come to Luxembourg, and so she didn't want to have a commitment. So the first thing I asked for was a get out of jail free card to go immediately back to London. If it's not working out after 6 months, we shift back, we've got a job, right? And the second thing I asked for was an interview for Sarah. Okay, give her an interview. If she doesn't work out, that's fine, but at least give her an interview, because she's struggling to even get anybody to talk to her. I walked in the next day. I said, okay, if you can do this, then we'll stay. And he looked at it. He's like, done. I'm like, really? and I remember a few years later recounting this story to the partner that was my mentor at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was recounting this story, and he looked at me. He's like, that was you? Because apparently, the partners in Lux weren't consulted at all. I mean, it was just like, obviously, and this guy had just got on the phone. They'd never heard of him, right? It's like, right, this guy's coming to Luxembourg. You're giving this lady an interview, and by the way, if it doesn't work out after 6 months, he can leave. And they're like, but back then, that's how Pricewaterhouse worked. So, it worked out, and then I had to make the call to Chase and explain that, yes, okay, this is what they came back with, and they said, yeah, we can't give you that. You need to make a commitment for us, and away you go. So, and the guy at Chase is now back here in Luxembourg. And he reminds me when I see him, it's like, I've still got your signed contract in the drawer, John. Yeah,
technically,
he still works at Chase.
No, he doesn't now. He doesn't now. But yeah, I think he kept the contract anyway.
But at the time, you said you had a child already, or
no, and that was so we came here for 2 years.
Yeah,
and I would say that for the first 7 years. It was quite touch and go as to whether we stay, right? I mean, basically the career discussions that I'd had with the partners here in Lux meant that, it was a very fast track here in Lux. And to give you an idea, I arrived in June. The following May, I had a conversation with this partner, and basically he said to me, so thinking I'm just coming up to manager 3 at that point, he's basically saying, well, I've had a conversation with the other partners, and we think if you stay in Luxembourg, then you'll be a good candidate for partner. Not immediately, obviously, right? But even having that sort of conversation at that level, it's like, whoa, right? And that was already a nightmare, because we were like nearly 1 year in, and Sarah already had the horizon of 1 year to go, and then we're having this agonizing discussion. And it's like, well, it's stupid to leave, right? And so let's carry on in Luxembourg.
She was working at the time.
She was at Pricewaterhouse as well.
Yeah, so
she went and got interviewed, and I think they'd sort of disconnected the two, and they're like, wow, yeah, hire her, right? Because she's super smart, very good auditor, very organized, very all the stuff I'm not, basically.
She was also like an auditor too.
Yes, yeah. So we're a real exciting family. Yeah, live on the edge. But so she was working for PW as well, and all of a sudden, I remember because when we had this conversation with this partner, we were actually in Bermuda at a conference in Bermuda, and he'd taken us out for dinner. And then we were supposed to be, we were taking then another sort of week and a half there on holiday. And the holiday was completely trashed because then we were just talking about, well, what do we do? What do we do? And, you know, anyway, obviously we stayed. But I would say it was, you know, stayed with Sarah very reluctantly staying because it was sort of the right thing to do for us overall. And it was only really when we had children that Sarah actually converted. She got to like it more and more, but she still had her moments. And when we had children, because this is such a fantastic place to raise kids. Yeah. And it's not, I mean, it's not just the sort of the environment about it being safe and nice and all this sort of stuff, but actually the people really love children here. You know, I remember our daughter being really upset because she'd gone back to the UK to visit grandparents and stuff with Sarah, and she was in a supermarket, and she starts talking to the person doing the checkout because that's what she does in Cactus, right? And this person just completely ignored her. Right, it's just like, who the hell are you, little girl? Just stop, and just one of those things that I remember that people really like children here, yeah, and it's a really nice environment to raise children, and I think that was the moment where it really converted Sarah. Now, I mean, we won't leave Luxembourg. We love Luxembourg, but it's 27 years, so that's just as well, really.
It's a lot.
And your kids, what are they doing now?
So my daughter is fourth year at medical school in London. So she's at Imperial College in London. You know, she was somebody that always wanted to be a doctor as she was growing up. Wanted to be a surgeon actually, and that's what she's doing. And then my son, actually, he's in his final year of school again in the UK. It wasn't planned like that, but that's how it sort of worked out for various reasons, which I won't bore you with. So he's in his final year in the UK of school, and then we'll see what he does after that. He's an 18-year-old boy, so he's bit like his dad, no idea what he wants to do, right?
And when you had like your first kid, your career was going like really fast also. It was like challenging for you as a dad, but also at the time like
to balance off.
To balance your life and everything.
It's now I'd say firstly I've been very, very fortunate. Okay, you know, Sarah and I basically took a decision at a point in time that basically the person that had the biggest potential for career in PW was me, and so she was basically, you know, I wouldn't say she was supporting me, but she was always there for me, right? And there was always sort of an unwritten sort of priority, if you like. We had children. She came back part-time and finding that difficult in terms of balancing, because actually it wasn't balancing. You know, there was always my stuff came first type thing, and it was just how it was. Yeah. We then started talking about having a second, and so she essentially left the firm, and I basically made partner when we had our first child. And honestly, you know, she had the experience, unlike myself, where her mother stopped work when they were born and looked after the children until they were grown up, and then went back to work. And so we always had or certainly Sarah was always very big on one of the parents should be at home, okay, and actually invest in the children themselves, right? And so that's what she's done, right? And so she's made the sacrifice, and it's sort of a conversation that we've had, and you know, over the years it's been, you know, sometimes very natural, but sometimes quite difficult. You know, because she was, as said, she was by far a better auditor accountant than I was. There's no question she would be a partner today in the firm and a senior partner in the firm if she'd have stayed. But there's equally no question that I would not be where I am if she'd have stayed, right? And because that balance would have then had to be both of us working through that, and that's fine, and that's fine for many people, right? But that's not how we chose to do it. And so, you know, I've been very fortunate with the fact that Sarah really, she does everything. I mean, I joke she's my banker. I struggle in terms of knowing which banks we have, right? Relationships. She really looks after all of that and all of the stuff at home. And it's not because that's what she loves to do, right? It's because that's sort of the deal that we have. But I would say that the biggest challenge, therefore, that we've worked through over the years in terms of my workload and how we sort of operate, because I was traveling all the time and so never there. And, you know, when I was there, you're catching up on everything. So I was never home and, you know, it's very hard. The biggest thing that we found was making time for us. Because, you know, when I was there, and normally, you know, I'd be sort of like, if I'm home, I never work at home, right? It's like I'm in the office, I work, I'm at home, I'm at home. I'm not checking email. I'm not, you know, if someone calls me on my mobile, that's different. But, so you sort of, you know, I had that sort of split anyway. But essentially where we started to find ourselves is my life was work and kids, right, as they were growing up. And one of the things that we did, and actually I always offer this advice to, you know, people I see with young families, one of the things that we did was we basically said we have to make sure that we have time for us. And you can do it in different ways, but what we did was we did date night every Friday. So every Friday we'd go to the same restaurant, same taxi driver, same babysitter, probably the same meal, right? and we did try other restaurants, but actually we always ended up coming back to the same place, because the point was it wasn't about going out and having a nice dinner. It was actually about going out and being together. Yeah, and actually, you know, because it was the same restaurant, you didn't have to worry about the food or the service or anything, because it was all just the same.
Just focus on you and your wife.
You focus on the conversation and catching up, and it was for us. I actually think that if we hadn't done that, we might not be together today. Okay, and I think it's actually that stark, because I think you could very quickly go into very parallel lives, you know. Her life with the kids, my life at work, we sort of overlap with the kids, but actually we're not coming together. Yeah. Whereas each week we remembered why we were together, and they weren't always great nights, right? You know, sometimes it'd be very short and quite. That wasn't a good evening, but because we were doing it every week, it didn't really matter. Yeah, there was a cadence to it that really meant that it was. You know, it meant that we could stay connected and stay on the sort of same page as a couple. For me, I think that's super important, and I think it's very, very easy for young couples with families to forget. And so, you know, that's how we sort of manage through the challenge of the. So,
do you think that the time off from work and everything, and also time off that you spend with your wife is part of your success in this case?
No question. Right? It's like without the support of Sarah, there's just no way I'd be here. Well,
there is like a saying. It says, like, I think behind every great man there's a great woman.
There's an even greater woman.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. In my case, that is true. It's
what I like to say is, like, next to a great man, not behind, because, you know, it's like you're doing stuff together. So it's
and that's right.
We have to be compliant. Yes, no, but it's true. I really believe in it.
Okay, tell us 3 things you like and 3 things you dislike about your current position.
As CEO, you mean? Three things I like. I think one of the best things in my role is that I see the amazing stuff that we do as a firm. I see the amazing people that we've got, and I prior to this position, I had quite a sort of a narrow remit, which was in the asset management sector. That was where I was focused. And again, fantastic people, fantastic clients. I loved it, right? Here, you come into this role here in Luxembourg and you see the breadth of what we've got, and you see the energy of the people and the partners that are driving that. And it's just such an inspiration. I mean, it's just amazing, right? So I think that for me is probably the standout in the role that I am. I'm privileged to be able to see that. I think the second piece is the access it also provides me to just incredible people outside. Whether that's here in Luxembourg in terms of the clients, or the government, or other sort of institutions here. You really meet some of the top people, and people that are really, really interesting, right? And the ability to actually meet with those and actually feel like you're making an impact in those meetings is great. And also in the network, you get to very quickly know a completely different type of people in the network. So I think that's probably the second piece. And then the third piece probably for me is the feeling that I actually can make a difference, that I can do stuff that makes our firm an even better place to be, and actually do stuff that hopefully in its own small way makes society a better place to be, or helps our people, or helps our clients. It's sort of all that sort of surround sound, but you sort of feel that I can really try and make a difference whilst I'm lucky enough to be in this role. The stuff I don't like about this role, there's a lot of detail, which I hadn't really appreciated, and I prefer the sort of the title of sort of chief visionary officer, or chief executive, or chief excitement officer is another thing I've been called, rather than chief executive officer, because there is a lot of stuff that you have to get roll your sleeves up. And it's not that I can't do that. I'm an auditor. That's sort of what we do, right? But it's just not what I enjoy, right? I think the second piece I don't enjoy is that on the one hand, you see the best of people and you see just fantastic things, but on the other hand, you also see the worst of people, right? And you see behaviors that actually you shouldn't see in the firm, right? And you need to do something about it. And that's sort of where you're sort of disappointed, yeah. And that's less fun, I would say. And probably the third piece I don't like about the job is that when I was working with my clients, it was quite easy to operate as I described to you, in terms of I'm home, I'm home. I'm at work, I'm at work. I'm on holiday, I'm on holiday. Because I would work that with my clients. My clients would know. And I would know if my clients are contacting me when they know it's my weekend or on holiday, I'd know it was important, so it wouldn't be a problem. But I know they wouldn't contact me if it wasn't important, right? So there was that sort of, so I was able to manage that sort of quite well, I think, with my clients, and then the home work thing, right? You become CEO 24/7. I tell you, I've never worked so hard, and I used to work hard. Nothing like this, right? And it never stops. So I mean, it's rarely that I'm not working at a weekend.
I might have another question for you.
Actually, we see you, but like a semi-god, right? So we want to put
a semi-god.
We want to put you a bit on on the ground. So some like daily life questions, right?
Yeah.
Something we should, quick, and then you tell us.
Quick fire. Yeah.
Okay. Worst habit that you have but you're ashamed of?
Smoking.
Smoking. Okay. Celebrity crush?
Celebrity crush. Probably there's an Audrey Hepburn there. There is there is and it's a bit Sheryl Crow, and there is a Jodie Foster.
Jodie Foster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
would be sort of a mix of those.
Yeah.
Quite pleasant.
Favorite food in the world?
Sorry?
Food. Favorite food?
In the world. Favorite food. Probably. So if the meal I would have if I was, getting executed tomorrow.
Yeah.
What's my last meal? My last meal would be Maryland crab cakes. It would be US steak, really big time US steak,
Okay.
cream spinach, onion rings, New York cheesecake, martini, 2 martinis to start, and a huge bottle of red wine. Right, so that would be my last supper, if you like. And actually, one of the great things I obviously haven't done it for a while, but when I go to New York, what I try and do is I try and connect with all the people from Luxembourg that are on tour there. Okay, so I take them out for lunch on the last, and so I love doing it because essentially, firstly, I catch up with all the people, and it's fascinating to hear what they're up to. But we always go to a steak restaurant, and it's always the last lunchtime before I fly out. So I will have exactly what I've just described to you for my meal, right?
But you wake up the following morning.
Exactly. They go back to the office. I hop in a taxi and head to the airport.
Then go.
Perfect.
Actually, for me, whenever I go,
Crush,
whenever I go to UK, for me it's Nando's.
Nando's.
Nando's, I love it. No,
Really?
you don't.
I've been once.
And?
I've been once, and I'm like,
No?
it's chicken,
Yeah.
and it's quite dry.
But we
it's,
don't have it in mainland.
What,
so,
chicken?
No, Nando's.
Yeah, but it's chicken. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, it must be huge. It must be really, really appreciated.
Maybe it's a millennium thing. I don't know. It's-
And maybe I just had a bad sort of just a
Bad
it was
experience.
just a chicken. I just didn't see what people saw in it. I was quite excited to go and try it. I actually know one of the one of the private equity guys here that owns
okay.
Nando's. So I was sort of said, "Oh, we should go in and try it." But yeah.
Fair enough. Favorite book? Do you have one?
Lord of the Rings.
I like it. I love it.
Amazing book.
Okay.
And actually probably if there's any Tolkien watchers out there, and by this time I'm not sure there are going to be any watchers out there at all, but probably the Silmarillion, which is the book that is sort of before the Lord of the Rings.
First app you open in the morning on your phone?
It's Espresso, which is the it's a daily like a daily news thing from The Economist.
Okay.
It's actually I read the Times over breakfast, and then when I get into the office, I have a coffee and
you check
and read the Espresso app from The Economist, which is excellent, by the way. I would highly recommend it. Basically it is 3 or 4 minutes, and you've got Economist insights on all of the key stories of the day.
Okay, cool.
And some interesting, funky stuff as well, like The Economist likes to do.
If it wasn't what you're currently doing, what do you think would be your current profession?
Wow. Well, I mean, the job I went for at 16 was to work as a navigation officer on an oil tanker.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So potentially I would be the captain of an oil tanker in one of these big or a captain of a ship.
A ship. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I also had when I was at university, I sort of almost went into the police force. I mean, obviously, my dad was a policeman, And even when I was training as an accountant, I sort of thought, well, maybe the forensic sort of police type side of things might be quite interesting as well. But yeah, so maybe police, maybe merchant navy.
Teach me something I don't already know.
Teach you something that you don't already know.
Yeah.
I could teach you how to make the perfect beef stroganoff. Okay. Yeah, and I'm not going to teach you now, right? But I could tell you right now.
How do you know that I don't already know?
You're Italian.
Yeah, from Napoli. So
okay.
From Napoli. Oh, you're from Napoli.
Yep.
Oh, we love Capri. It's fabulous.
Yeah.
I could teach you the best hotel room to stay in Capri.
Wait. Maybe I know. It's like on the top with the view on the Faraglioni. It's at, I don't remember the name. Which?
Well, the one that we go to is Hotel Tiberius. Which isn't the one. There's another one which we've not been to, but I tell you, this phenomenal.
Tiberius
to Capri.
Is called?
Tiberius, yeah, Tiberius
okay.
Hotel.
Okay.
It's,
So final one. Picture this: you have to go to dinner at a table of 4, and you can bring 3 people, right, from any time. So in the past or right now, in the present, from anywhere in the world. So who would you pick?
Probably Winston Churchill.
Okay.
Would be one. Probably Einstein. It'd just be fascinating to share with him, and probably somebody like a Jobs or a Gates, somebody that is really just a complete inspiration on the business side. And I know I'm out of things, but I think something like I don't know if it would be a Gandhi or somebody like that that's really got that existential sort of view of things. Jesus, maybe
a bit of philosophy
would be quite cool. Yeah. Jesus would be quite good.
First take, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure if they'd Gandhi he wouldn't be able to eat the steak, so he's off, right? Churchill would be there with the champagne and the brandy. So yeah.
Nice. Okay.
You let me get back to my weekend now, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. You're free to go.
Okay.
Or you have one last question? Or I thought you said that was your last question.
No, like no, we can ask you like how was it? Did you like it? The interview, like
chatting to a couple of fun Italian guys who actually don't mind listening to all my boring stories. Perfect. Doesn't get much better.
Thanks a lot for coming, John.
Pleasure.
It was a pleasure, really.
Yeah, it was really good, and see you in the office.
You got it. Okay. Ciao,
Thanks
ciao. Connecting with you on Monday, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
There we go. Big news as well. So tune in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All righty.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
really.